Yes, we are live. Go, Danielle.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Danielle Davis, and I am the Tech and Telecom Policy Counsel for the Multicultural Media, Telecom, and Internet Council, more commonly known as MMTC here in Washington, D.C. Thank you all so much for joining us in this panel today, where we are discussing the big data economy, inclusion, and fairness. And today we're going to discuss how digital transformation, automation, globalization have sparked radical shifts in societies, and it's given rise to this new economy driven by big data analytics, and the Internet of Things. The expansion of the digital economy has placed big data, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and data science at the center of the debate about the future of digital inclusion. And in particular, Internet access is poised to reach hundreds of millions of new individuals over the next decade, bringing services and opportunities to historically excluded populations. Big data offers great potential for data-driven decision-making to inform individuals, businesses, and government decisions, but science will be crucial and important to ensuring transparency, equity, and trust. However, algorithmic decision-making increasingly affects everyday life, and the benefits must be weighed against the potential to codify and amplify existing biases. The collection and usage of vast amounts of personal data to improve decision-making must be weighed against the potential for fraud or the invasion of privacy. And this raises the question, and it's the center of essentially what we're going to be discussing today, and that's how can we properly harness data and their value to maximize individuals and society's welfare. And today we have a great panel of experts to help us dive into this question. So first we have Tiffany Deng, who is currently serving as Chief of Staff and Program Management Lead for Google's Research Center for Responsible AI and Human-Centered Technology, where she works to ensure Google's products for everyone. Thank you so much, Tiffany. Next, we have Sarah E. Chasins, who is an Assistant Professor of Electrical Engineering and Computer Sciences at UC Berkeley. Her lab invents usable programming tools to democratize computation, especially to empower social scientists, journalists, and other non-traditional programmers. Her research focuses on programming languages and program synthesis, with an emphasis on one, work at the intersection of program languages and human-computer interaction, and two, work at the intersection of program languages and social good. Thank you so much, Sarah. We also have Jordana Barton-Garcia, who is a senior fellow with Connect Humanity. She is also the principal of the social enterprise Barton-Garcia Advisors. Her work helps organizations and communities achieve full participation in the digital economy and promotes economic development, health equity, telehealth, workforce development, educational equity, access to financial services, and entrepreneurship. Thank you so much, Jordana. And last but not least, we have Laura Chioda, and she is the Director of Research at the Institute for Business and Social Impact at UC Berkeley. She collaborates with UCB faculty to formulate and develop research agendas for the Institute's strategic priorities, which include fintech and banking, sustainability, mental health, and diversity inclusion. So thank you all so much for joining me today. So I'm just going to get right into it. We can start with our first question. That's just going to kind of just give us of overall reason, like why is this even important? So from each of your views, from your point of view, why is digital inclusion especially important in today's society? Sarah, we can start with you.
Yeah, so I'll come at it from a perspective of basically the power that you get from being able to program computers and automate work that you want to do. So the ability to program computers lets people do some tasks really quickly that would be tedious and would take months if they had to do it painstakingly by hand. So I'm often working with teams who are trying really hard to change society for the better, but they're having to do these automatable tasks very slowly, manually, often with volunteer labor or with folks who are already, stretched thin with their other responsibilities. And I'd love for them to have the same access to programming and automation that high resource teams already have today.
That's awesome. Okay, so Tiffany, what about you?
Yeah, I love the points that Sarah makes. And I would just add that I think about it from a responsibility perspective, right? So when you think about how ubiquitous things like AI are today, how we interact with it in so many different facets of just everyday life, it's super important that we ensure that there's balance right there, and that we're thinking about those that the power that it has, again, to Sarah's point, the responsibility we have to ensure that how it affects different communities disproportionately, we take that into account. And we have safeguards and guardrails there to ensure that they're not kind of having that outsized burden like on them at all times.
Absolutely. I completely agree. What about Jordana or Laura? How do you feel about why digital inclusion is especially important in today's society?
I can start there. Now, I think essentially why digital inclusion is important is because all of this discussion about equity, right, in AI, machine learning, and all of these advancements and challenges, right, in our society, we can't get to equity there unless we have equity at the base, right? Mm-hmm. And I think they talked about this yesterday, the definition of broadband, right? Well, I and Connect Humanity, define broadband as, of course, the infrastructure, right? Whether you have the infrastructure, we've had an underinvestment, a disinvestment of infrastructure in low income and in communities of color, and recent articles by the Markup and PBS as well, showed just how broadband has been deployed and the inequities there for low income or people of color. So the infrastructure, the affordability of the devices and the subscription, and then the digital skills training. So all of that, right? We have to work at the base, and fiber broadband, right, is what enables first, 4G, so that we could have, these social media platforms, you could upload videos and all that. And now 5G, and I mean the standard 5G, not the advertising thing, where you can have intermittent signals, right? And you collect all these vast data on people and movements and all of those things. And 5G enables the Internet of Things, including our cell phones as sensors, and IoT enables big data, and big data enables AI, right? So if we don't get it right at the very root, and invest in fiber-based broadband networks for all communities, and do this work of digital inclusion broadly, right, so that you can engage young people. We know from the Michigan State University study that young people with high-speed broadband at home are more likely to do well in school, to go into STEM careers, right? So the stakes are very high, right? We can't assume that just because billions of dollars in the IIJA and the Federal Infrastructure and Jobs Act, people cannot assume that is going to bring fiber-based broadband networks to low-income and underserved communities, because there are a lot of rules there that may be replicating the status quo. So we need to all come together and use all the resources of our community to work at that very base, and so that we can have a chance, right, of for one, people understanding technology and all of that, right, and having access to the digital economy for all the benefits that we get from that, right? So I would say, let's just not miss this moment, because it's not the billions of dollars that are just going to take care of it, and then we can move on to all these decisions we have to make. We have to engage everybody in these decisions, and they need to own it. And the only way to do it is to make it ubiquitously available. We know how to do it. We know the best practices, but sometimes with all the rules, we're like arguing about minimums from years ago and so forth.
Absolutely, completely agree. And we're going to touch on a little bit of that in our next question, but I want to see if Laura has anything to add to
this. Yeah, just very quickly, it's very much about opportunity, and opportunity in many dimensions. Think about our life. If all of a sudden I take away computer, cell phone, access to internet, we are not able, and we actually had this kind of test drive with COVID-19. Everybody became very clear which job could be done remotely, which kids could attend school remotely, their connection at home. This is not just the US, this is much more global. Uganda closed the school for an entire academic year, actually 1.5 academic year, because they didn't have the infrastructure. Job market opportunity, we saw the business that they were thriving in developing countries, but also in the US, were the one that were able to pivot very quickly to online and digital presence. So this is not just about, I want to be able to Google what is my next kind of Spotify kind of cool song, but it's very much an issue of opportunity. And clearly there are kind of unintended consequences and concern that we need to be available, but just access and the quality of that access, we saw that yesterday in the panel, just because I have an internet connection doesn't mean I can do all that I want with that internet connection, becomes an issue very much on leveling different field of opportunities. There are opportunities in health, in education, in economics, in mental health, when you think about telehealth. So it's very much an issue of equalizing opportunity. And again, just the number of interaction we interact, we have daily with devices is just a good marker of essentially our life are intrinsically kind of linked to the internet. Danielle, if you forgive me for a second, I'm also, IPSI is also with SIGA is hosting the Marconi Society. First of all, we are super excited to have this panel, but more generally to partner with the Marconi Society for this event. I want to spend 2 seconds to actually thank people behind the scene that make this event actually possible, from Cynthia to Paula to Chantal to Dan to Iman. I know that I organize conference, we all organize conference, but we would not be here without them. And the last but not least, we were excited to partner with Marconi. This is a fantastic event, but even more excited again that we were honoring Siavash. I don't have to tell you guys that he's a leader in his field, but he's also a wonderful human being and deeply connected to the public good. So I cannot think of a better event to actually honor him. So again, sorry for stealing this for a little bit of institutional chit chat, but I felt like I wanted to give praise to everybody that is making this event possible. And maybe next time we're going to have you guys in person. We have good weather, as you can see from this.
No problem. Okay, so just to follow up to question 1, I kind of wanted to touch on the things that Jordana talked about in reference to just, basic internet connection, and just seeing how now I know that we're going back into a situation where we're moving back into in-person events and trying to get back to normal. But we already know that the pandemic shined an uncomfortable light on one of the most important serious racial inequities in the country, which is a lack of broadband. And it's not even a new issue. Like you mentioned, this is something that has been going on for a very long time. In fact, something that I remember over 10 years ago, the National Broadband Plan, observing that as more aspects of our daily lives move online and offline, alternatives disappear and the range of choices available to people without broadband narrow. And when you think about the fact that it's only modest investments have been made since the pandemic, that's when we started really seeing real investments, I would say, and how we are having this whole remote shift to everything. I would say that the cost of inclusion is kind of growing higher, just as Jordana and all of you have kind of referenced. But my question is to Jordana is, how can you explain how digital inclusions, which you did kind of already touch on, but digital inclusion compounds inequities for historically marginalized groups, and also explain what makes this time the most opportune time to do this work?
The reason broadband is so critical is because it is an intersecting issue, right? It intersects all of the social determinants of health, right? All the areas we work on in community development, whether you have access to healthcare, whether you can start a business, right? And grow a business of the kinds of businesses now based on IP protocol and other, e-commerce and all that, whether you could survive as a business during the pandemic, for example, you have to be really good at e-commerce, and educational equity and opportunity, workforce, right? We have a completely changed workforce. What is it now? Like 90% of middle skills jobs, not requiring a college degree, require digital skills. And then the more you go up in opportunity in the labor market, the more digital skills, right? So we need to totally change, because the automation in manufacturing and e-commerce have all those used to be the jobs that you could enter the middle class, and your kids would go to school. You'd have that upward mobility, but we don't have that anymore. We have new entry points into the middle class. And that's what digital inclusion, our work in communities, right, really brings those kinds of opportunities. Right now, I'm sitting on the Texas-Mexico border at a conference working with communities, and we've developed a digital workforce development program to go with the IIJA funds that we're trying to attract, right, with our local ISPs and co-ops. They're going to be able to have jobs for young people, paid internships and apprenticeships, right, to build and design broadband networks, to maintain, learn about maintaining them, to get the IT skills, to run the help desk, a very inclusive economy vision, right? Well, the reason it's so critical is to our economy and to upward mobility and opportunity is because it's a platform for in all of these areas that we work on for well-being, in our community, that provide opportunities for upward mobility, entrepreneurship, all of that, the supply side and the demand side of workforce development. So the preparing people for the jobs of now and the future to enter the middle class, and attracting business, right? We can't attract business, for example, to the border region. I've worked on it for years as a banker, right? Community development banker. We didn't have the foundational broadband infrastructure for them to do their work. Our kids brain drain, right? Building businesses in Silicon Valley, maybe, we have several examples, but they could have started the businesses here in the Valley of Texas, right? But we don't have the infrastructure. So that's why it's so critically important. It impacts all of these areas of opportunities for upward mobility.
Thank you. So yeah, I completely agree. And I kind of want to shift into a similar aspect, just on education a bit, but billions of people across the globe essentially interact with this new economy on a regular basis through their computers, their phones, and other smart devices. And it's completely changed the technology landscape that millions of people reap the benefits from. But however, there's a general lack of understanding of the technical terms surrounding this new economy. And just to ensure we have a base level understanding for our audience or whoever is out there who doesn't understand this stuff as much as maybe all of the experts on this panel, Tiffany, what exactly is big data? Like, what is artificial intelligence? What is AI? And what's the relationship between the two? And if anyone else has anything they want to add, they can go after Tiffany. But Tiffany?
Sure. So really quickly, artificial intelligence is generally, and I think just kind of in simplest terms, using systems to mimic human behavior. And so you can think about things like chatbots that are used to you can talk to, and they can help you understand things better. You can think about our intelligent AI systems like Alexa or Google. Hey, Google, you're asking them questions and they're giving you responses back as a human would. And then recommendation engines. I'm sure everyone's really, really, adept and understand those. They tell you what you should watch, what you should watch next, which songs you may like, which restaurants you may want to go to. So those recommender systems are what we call artificial intelligence. A subfield of artificial intelligence is machine learning. And often those are like conflated, but really what machine learning is having systems that collect lots and lots of data points that are translated into models, which can help us predict things and inform outcomes. And so those two concepts are really, really closely linked. This is really where the term kind of big data comes into play. And it's important because it informs everything from our credit worthiness. So all these billions of data points determine whether or not we're worthy to get a loan. We know that if you live in certain parts, if we use inputs like your zip code, that can be used to say, hey, folks in this area of our country aren't worthy enough for credit. And all of a sudden, no other factors may be involved, and you could get denied credit, right? Where school buses may go to, right? Another input from data that is collected in various forms, right? So there's just a whole host of things that you interact with in your everyday life that you may not even be aware of. That is a result of these lots and lots and lots of large, complex data points that inform kind of the opportunities, to this panel's point earlier, that you can have to be successful, to be able to access the opportunities you need to change your life.
Okay, so just touching on something that you said, like it essentially, people have no idea that they're using AI without even realizing it. You touched on Alexa and other things that we're using on an everyday basis, but what are some other ways that these technologies show up in our lives? Like what are some more average ways besides the Netflix and the apps that we are essentially using big data and AI without necessarily realizing it?
Yeah, I can answer that. Laura looked like she wanted to say something, so I want to give her the opportunity.
I wanted to add something to Tiffany's point. So why we all of a sudden, I guess 10 years ago, probably Tiffany was already dealing with AI and ML, but most of us, we're not as cognizant of AI and ML. Why it becomes so prominent with digital economy? In part because AI used to be prescriptive, meaning like historically to map human behavior. And I think one of the most famous applications are chats. Can a computer replicate a chat move? So the point is like, I need to be very prescriptive. So to tell a robot or some artificial intelligence to replicate my behavior, I needed to spell out all possible state of the world of human behavior that kind of, interaction, robot or mechanics or something needed to replicate their correct response that a human can very easily process. The digital economy has created trace and the billion data, and that's why now AI and ML are becoming more and more synonymous, even though they're actually conceptually distinct. But now we have two things have happened. One is our trace of data. All of us are billions of observations. The other element is the ability to process that information. And so that allows you to extract, if you want to pattern in the data, that then replicate that human behavior. So while AI historically, it's been always on the radar of data scientists and computer scientists, was much more prescriptive. The digital economy, if you want to add make level up the kind of AI and ML, because it's really making more an empirical problem that use these digital traits that we kind of create every time we interact with the economy. But back to Tiffany, and I. On the application and unintended application, and I'm happy to chime in on that as well.
Thank you, Laura. So Tiffany, I'll just go ahead and repeat the question. So studies have indicated that many people are using AI without us realizing it. And some studies have noted that most of the time people are unaware of the AI that is beneath the things they use every day. So like, what are some of the ways we have, we use these technologies every day, but most people wouldn't recognize it?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest applications is just everything you do on your phone, right? And your location data. Again, the recommendations that you're getting off of your phone, your recommendations for whom you should meet, right? Or whom you should maybe be friends with, right? That's all AI powered, all AI generated. Another big place that folks may not understand is things like admissions. Right. I mean, there's a lot swirling around now from the Supreme Court and other places on how you can use data and if you should use automated decision making within the context of college admissions, job applications, just simply filling out a form, submitting your resume, and whether or not, again, you can have this opportunity to have a job. A lot of that is AI powered and generated. So all these things that we think are pretty innocuous end up having large ramifications. And so there is a responsibility to first educate people on this so that they understand these concepts. As Laura talked about, ML, AI, they are distinct, concepts, but we should know about them, right? And we should know about them because people should have agency and transparency in how and where AI and ML, happens and how it impacts their lives. They should have agency and transparency into their data, their personal data, and how that's being used, and whether or not they want it to be used to inform things like ads, or whether they care about the relevancy of the ads, location tracking, things like that. We have to think about ways to give the users and the people control over their destiny and how their data is used in all aspects of their lives.
Absolutely. And that's a great segue, because this is such an important issue when you think about it, the way you just framed it, Tiffany. But considering that online privacy is largely unregulated in the United States, that presents, a serious issue when we think about these things, about getting the transparency and the protection of the consumer protections that we need. And even though we have, I guess right now, somewhat of a privacy legislation making its way through the U.S. Congress, the U.S. doesn't currently have a singular federal law that covers all types of data. Rather, we have a patchwork of laws that either covers like a specific type of data, like credit data or health information, or a law that like regulates specific populations like children. So Jordana, I have a question for you. Do you feel that this current patchwork approach to online privacy creates barriers to a more inclusive digital society? Why or why not?
Yeah, certainly because of some of the examples, we gave, it's generally for a lot of people who are in social media and so forth, everything is running in the background. And that's another connection, right, to technology and digital inclusion, right? Part of that is building great digital citizens who know how things work, the architecture of the internet and all of that. So I think because it's affecting, talking about the examples that people are giving, whether you get a loan, what interest you pay for the loan, you don't even know. You think you're submitting your application, and that a person is looking at it. It's an algorithm, right? They're basing it on years of data on borrowers. Insurance, whether you even can get insurance, it depends what the data says about you, right? The price you pay, how and jobs and everything else, like we were saying. So to go back to your question, I think that it's specifically critical right now, right, that we get this right on digital inclusion, because things are moving so fast, right? And Silicon Valley and technology is, they're talking over here, assuming that everybody has connectivity, and there's obviously connections like this meeting and the people here, but we need to do a lot better at that, right? And say, hey, we can't go anywhere in equity without the foundation, and so it's specifically real important right now, because we have this shrinking middle class because we're not preparing people for the labor market, and we have these extremes because of the ability, right, to create these huge businesses. So we have a lot of billionaires, and then this gap, right? So and low income people are getting our downward mobility, right? And young people are not doing better than their parents like we always expected. So I think I answered your question. You can bring me back to it if you want to.
No, you did. And you made some great points. And before we just kind of go too deep into just talking about like a lot of the problems and the biases with, I would say, these technologies, I want to acknowledge that how some of these tools can benefit us as a society. So Sarah is going to be the first person I talk to about this. What are some of the social benefits that AI solutions provide to societies? And how can these technologies potentially make our lives better? And how can these technologies also positively impact vulnerable communities?
So I'm not an expert on the automated decision-making side of it, so I'll leave that element to others, maybe to Laura, but I can give an example of how I think data-informed decision-making can help.
Go for it.
So I had a really exciting collaboration with a team of sociologists, and they were working on housing voucher programs, trying to set rent thresholds in a way that helps low-income families move to high-opportunity neighborhoods. And then the obstacle that they were coming up against was that in the city where they were working, rent was rising really, really rapidly. And just getting data from the census every 10 years wasn't cutting it. Rent thresholds would be set too low. Families wouldn't be able to find any units below the thresholds. And when we were working together, they figured out that online rental listing sites like Craigslist or apartments.com, that kind of thing, that could help them get the real-time data that they needed. Unfortunately, at that time, there were not easy-to-use programming tools available for them. We were eventually able to actually create those and get them that data. But I think for teams like this that are trying to support vulnerable communities, vulnerable populations, I think it's really important that we give them the tools to collect and understand data to support them in that work. So that's the kind of space where I see, advances in programming technologies, advances even in AI-backed technologies really serving people and doing some good out there.
Thank you, Sarah. That's such important work. And like I told you, we have to definitely talk offline more about that. But Laura, it's going to be sort of the same question, just from the economic perspective. So what economic benefits do these AI solutions provide? And how can they help vulnerable communities? And how can they just make our lives better overall?
Yeah, and I'm going to take a step back and not just focus on economics, but kind of end with an example in economics. So if you think about any kind of weather tracking, wildfire tracking, earthquake tracking, anything that is an emergency response right now, even allocation on emergency kind of resources in the society, think about beds that are available for ICU beds or kind of resources in the cases of COVID, logistics to deploy vaccine. All that was AI power. There was an element that clearly was logistic and execution of the logistic, but very much some of these kind of decisions were very much AI power. Every time any of us get an imaging, whether it's a functional MRI, whether it's a breast cancer kind of exam, all those images are actually processed first and foremost with the AI and machine learning. So again, this is where, I think Siavash said this in the previous panel, the access to data and the power of machine learning is clearly is a technology. What you do with that data is what matters. I'm going to give you the specific example. This is the impact evaluation, one of the studies that we are doing in collaboration with the fintech, actually is like e-commerce in Mexico, in Colombia, and Latin America. I'm sure everybody knows, and you guys mentioned several times, your access to credit. So access to credit, especially in developing countries, relies on historical. And actually, when I came to the US, I could not open a bank account. I cannot get a rental place. My accent is Italian, for those who cannot detect it. But when I came here, I didn't have a credit history. At least I've had a credit history in Europe, but I didn't have a credit history here. Now, fast forward, you are in a developing country. You're a woman, for whatever reason, gender norms, actually rules, I'm less likely to have access to again, a traditional credit history. How do you assess whether I'm worth of that loan or that starting that business? So what we are using is actually non-traditional data that is not necessarily related, can be related in some other context. Some company have used the Telecom record, but we use actually your transaction level record. I know exactly what you buy when you interact with this platform. You get a manicure, did you get you buy grocery, do you go to a restaurant, at what time you buy a restaurant, did you interact with this person, at which time you have interaction with that person. That feels like very pervasive. Is it going back to what Tiffany and others were saying? That feels like, oh my God, you know everything about me. But what we do with that data is actually create a gender-specific credit score models that allow to actually score people that don't have traditional credit scoring. So this is where this power of this data can be just equally as predictive as the credit bureau. Use it for this specific purpose. I cannot take this data and sell it to somebody else to do something else. But this is where the ability to build consent and use for specific uses versus actually give a ubiquitous access to data can really improve these the power of data in kind of level in the playing field. Just for why we're doing gender-specific credit scoring, why focus on women? If you look at the data, I focus on impact, and you will actually look at behavior of women and men traditionally across countries. There seems to be better repair. However, when you get the pool with men, just similar as women tend to have lower kind of insurance rate in the US because tend to be safer driver. When they pool with women, they tend to be actually traditionally excluded from from scoring or receiving credit, because that gender variable in most countries cannot be taken into consideration in kind of setting the score. But there is two ways that gender variable is important. One, you now essentially scoring me as somebody else that makes a completely different decision. But two, you're not also taking into account that you don't observe my data. So your kind of machine learning model, your credit board kind of assessment model for me, when you don't assess on average enough data for women, it's not going to be accurate. And so this brings potential to one of the other concerns that we are talking about, if we have about it, as mentioned already, there is the fairness and the biases that is built in our data. So I think I'm going to stop there and like to transition to the next question. I know that we have a lot on biases in this.
No, I understand. And I thank you for that, because you made a lot of great points. And I'm interested in getting your opinion on some of those points and how they also can kind of relate to our nation's workforce and how AI decision making can have different effects on society. So you have on the one hand where workers who work with machines, they're more productive than those who don't, essentially, and ultimately that helps them to reduce costs and prices of goods and services. But on the other hand, there are workers who lose out, particularly those displaced by machines and those who now compete with them. So would you be able to explain to our audience how AI has contributed to labor market inequality, and in what ways can we better prepare the workforces in our communities for AI and digital automations?
So this is where I would distinguish between automation, because some of the products, I think about the Midwest, for all that are familiar with the US discussion politics, there was all this notion, all these jobs, these repetitive jobs are taken by machine or robot, and then so on and so forth. And so they're displaced. That's slightly different, that kind of the transition to the digital economy. So those were clearly kind of jobs that then require, again, the person that used to work in the auto industry and that job is displaced, what is additional jobs that that person would do? Actually, I'm going to tell you very kind of the evidence seems to point, whether it's automation in the context of the digital industry, there seems to be actually positive externality that while there is disappearance of some jobs, some other jobs are emerging. And so there is a net positive on the number of jobs. What is absolutely true is the number of skills. Can everybody take advantage of those jobs that are creating? The previous panel, again, sorry for referencing again, they were talking about younger generation be more kind of, even from the beginning, from when they're toddlers, be more kind of computer savvy, digitally savvy than kind of older population. So if you want the digital skill gap, it's very much for older population rather than younger population. And what we actually need to very, very much understand is which skills are changing, which demands for which skills. Ironically, clearly there is always going to be a pressure and a demand for technical skills. But on the other side, what do you see if you look at the World Economic Forum and what are the skill most required? Seems to be soft skills. So on one hand, you need to clearly have the technical skill, but on the other side, this ability and the intrinsic ability of what we call soft skills, so grit, determination, persistence, and whatever you define in terms of soft skills tends to be important. So also say, I'm not as pessimistic about the kind of negative of digital economy on the economy. I'm going to give you a couple examples. I work with people in refugee camps, but also people in Kenya. Digital micro work, content moderation done online. I think Sarah was mentioning some of these earlier in our opening statement. There is an increasing demand of digital skill, digital micro work. The problem is like, how do we connect people from Africa, people from developing countries to these opportunities? Turns out there are platforms that make this connection possible. Why that is exciting, again, for people, including refugees camp or in remote area of Africa, because now the labor market is actually delinked from the physical labor market. Whether it's in context of COVID or other contexts, now I can, if I have the access, and we are talking about, again, access and opportunity, to a connection, to an internet connection, then you can actually be able to earn a living wage. There is a completely different discussion about the safety, the security, and the technology beyond paying their work. that I don't think is part of this panel. I think to discuss afterwards. But there is a sense in which, if you want, the digital economy has actually expanded the footprint of our labor market. I'm going to tell you a darker side of AI and ML and I know that probably everybody has read this case on the press. It's when you use AI and ML to screen in CVs and application. Some institutions are doing better than this. Again, I'm not disclosing anything that is unknown. Amazon wanted to expand the diversity of their kind of coding skills and kind of workforce. So they decided to train a machine learning model using their current existing top coder to predict success of future applicants. Turns out clearly their application was done so that most of their kind of machine learning model was trained on a workforce that was predominantly male. So as a result, when you go out and try to predict Apple sample and screening, CV or even with a gender blind or CV of kind of general applicants, who do you think was more likely to be selected? Males. And this wasn't just based on, the fact that they were looking for, is there a male category? It was like, do they play football? Are kind of college predominantly kind of female college excluded? And so this is where we need to be careful, again, about this interaction between machine learning tools and AI tools. There's somebody else who says garbage in, garbage out. That means the quality of your data is going to be as important as the accuracy of your models, and also on the implication of which decision you kind of automate.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question for actually Sarah. And what responsibility or role would technologists play in our workforces or preparing our communities for this change?
Yeah, I definitely think computer scientists should be jumping in to help here as well, especially what you're just saying about the digital skills gap, right? Like it does not need to be as big a gap as it is today. We should be working harder on making programming tools that are learnable and usable. Computing does not have to be as hard as it is today. So I hope going forward, more computer scientists will work on making programming and automation and other computer skills easier for more audiences.
And Laura, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Actually, that's super important.
Okay.
So there are application and solutions, especially for underprivileged and underserved populations, that are not designed for those populations, very candidly. In the fintech space, I keep saying too, whether it's blockchain solution, it doesn't look like Venmo. Don't put it in front of these people. There has to be a purpose and an intention that comes when you design this solution for ease of use. The other element is trust. A lot of this population, the population that are kind of traditionally at this point excluded, whether it is cognitive tax or poverty, or because they're being prey of actually consistent kind of fraud opportunity or targets. I think there has to be an intentionality, and the work that Sarah is doing is fantastic, but also is much needed, because that work is needed to, one, build trust. The design of an application or interface is super important, and ease of use is just as important, if not more important.
Thank you. Jordana, do you have go for it.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yeah, I was actually going to reference back and harken back to something that Jordana said at the beginning, is just like building this foundation of equity. And I feel like you can see this gap in what Sarah is talking about and what Laura is talking about, right? So when you take the Amazon, example, you think about if there was, I don't know, a woman in the room, or say a woman of color in the room, or right, who can tell you about what, an HBCU looks like, how many people we get from those types of universities, why it's important to, include, women's colleges, right? Like think about Wellesley or like wherever. That representation is super important, right? And so if we don't have equity in the workplace, if we don't have those voices at the table, if people don't have those opportunities to be in those leadership positions, to talk about equity, to showcase that, and to make sure that their employees are doing the same, we'll continue to have these types of things that happen. We'll continue to see those gaps persist. And, the kind of dangerous part of AI will, really be, I think, and more so perpetuated throughout all of our systems if we don't have that base amount of equity that Jordana talks about, at the core of all we do.
And I mean, we have a very serious underrepresentation of Latinos and people of color in STEM careers, in computer science, and all of these areas. So the very design, right, of those networks, we need a diversity of people at the table to be able to recognize, right, the flaws and how to design systems that are better and get what we really want, right, rather than repeating the past. So that's clear, and that all has to do with digital inclusion and preparing people, transforming our educational system, working with digital inclusion, nonprofits, and really coming together, creating these experiential learning and apprenticeships and all of that to get to encourage more young people to be in STEM. And we know the impact of, if we bring high-speed broadband to them, the impact it has on them going into STEM. So creating new pathways and they, of course, people talk about, lifelong learning. We're having to learn. And I think Laura referred to, the World Economic Forum and how much retraining, right, we're going to have to do just because of the nature of technological advancements and change. So making that available to people, broadly, it is very much important that we get this get equity right at the base, because a lot of these good outcomes, these positive outcomes, will come out of that, or will be possible out of that. We have to be very deliberate, as Laura said, in our interventions, and I think we're missing the mark. We're the federal government is going to distribute these funds to, and some people, do believe it's to close the digital divide. Well, how is it really working, for one? And then how can we not just look at this as just a finite amount of money, and if we do it, great. If not, we're behind. We have community development in this country, the Community Reinvestment Act, and we can bring fiber broadband so that we can have all of this and people involved and connected, right? Because we can bring in other sources of funds. That's what we're good at, capital stacks. The community development field, with banks working with community-based organization to address redlining in this country, right? The digital redlining, it's critical also that we bring these capital stacks together. And so that, I was here in the border of Texas testifying for a congressional hearing, and that one of the congressional members said, you all might not get fiber, but you'll get something, in other words, be happy with what you, and it's just so insulting, right? These are people that are learning about the best practices in the field, and we can fund this. We just have to use all of our tools. The market, people talk about the market economy is so amazing. We have all these advancements and freedoms. Well, it's actually that we have this democratic, equitable market economy, capitalist system, right, that has held us together, right? Because we have this whole field of community development and this way to bring resources, and not just think that we're dividing a finite pie, but we're increasing the size of the pie. And that should be built into our policies of distributing these funds. Are you, making 20 million out of 5 million? That's what we do in community development in this country. And it's amazing. It's what brought me into this field, finance for good, right? And so it's left out of the equation. Like, people aren't even, like, let's bring it all together right about now, because the stakes are very high, because we're at a new place. This is the second machine age, the fourth industrial revolution. This is real. It's very fast for people. We're seeing the impact in our society and the threat to democracy. And we need everybody engaged, because you know what? We engage our young people all along the border and all of these communities that are underserved, Mississippi, Delta, Appalachia, and all of these areas, areas of course, Indian country and Native Americans. We'll get the creativity with everybody at the table to bring the right resources to the table, and stop thinking of this finite, pie that we're dividing up.
Got it. I understand. I loved all of your responses. And when we're talking about, especially just thinking about our conversation that we're having, are there areas in, I guess, within these technologies where maybe they should not take part in our lives? Like maybe certain technology should be banned in certain instances. Maybe when we think about criminal justice systems with facial recognition technology and predictive risk algorithms, considering those type of technologies are not 100% accurate, and they are definitely vulnerable to bias and abuse, and they definitely have misidentified people of color. How do you think we should we take greater care in how these technologies are deployed in already marginalized communities, especially when we're talking about issues that affect their liberty? So I'll open that up to everyone.
I think that's certainly what we're calling for. I'll just speak briefly, but I think that's certainly what we're calling for here. Is that we need to be more inclusive, bring more people into being connected to high-speed internet and all of the skills and training that goes along with it to be part of the digital economy, so that we can wisely together with people that are engaged. They haven't given their authority to the big corporations that tell them, oh, no, like we had here recently, oh, no, you all can't understand this community. You can't solve the digital divide and build your own fiber infrastructure. We know how to do it. You have to leave it to us because taxpayers don't want money, thrown out the window. Well, actually, in this country, municipal broadband and other public-private partnership models do work. The community can be involved and wants to be involved and can understand how this works, right? So just bring, the whole idea of digital inclusion is bring, agency to the people so that they can participate fully in the digital economy. And it is to make decisions just like that. Sometimes it's for amazing, incredible things that we're using AI, for example, and, algorithms to it's just come up with cures for cancer, all the things that we're going to see in our lifetime, solving climate change, right? And we want our young people at the table there because of those kinds of decisions that have to be made, so that we're using technology for good and making those, not falling into those decisions, but making those very, very deliberately and designing our education and the way we disperse funds in the IIJ and everything else, is that you're inclusive, right? You're not just thinking that, oh, I'm trying to do this and I'm passing out money. No, we can do this the right way. And how you get somewhere, guess what? It matters to where you end up, especially in digital inclusion.
Absolutely. Tiffany, you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, totally love all those points. I would add that, there's still this education through line, right? So that people, they should have agency, they should have transparency and control, but they should also be able to say, where did that data come from? Like that should be a question that everyone knows to ask, right? So when they're at the table and they have this opportunity to make affirmative and deliberate decisions, they can ask the right questions about things that affect them as a citizen. So I think education is a big through line. And I think there are many applications, again, like we talked about, that we all look forward to. We want to happen. But again, decisions, work with the community, everything should be deliberate and, more than anything, affirmative, instead of kind of looking back in the rearview mirror and saying we should have put this control in. We should be thinking more forward, thinking about the frameworks we'll use in the future to make those really consequential decisions.
Absolutely. Sarah?
Danielle? Oh,
I'm sorry. Go for it, Laura.
I think I want to bring it back to your question. Should we kind of ban or kind of limit the use of this tool in some cases? I think one of the cases that you're referring is the bail decision, for instance. Whether it's in California or in other contexts, the issues like can essentially machine learning kind of be used to replace essentially judges' decisions. And I think that's the important thing, is to replace or to complement judges' decisions. So you're absolutely right. Current existing data, whether it's because police racial profiling or because previous biases by judges' biases in kind of denying bail for specific crime or for specific kind of potential offenders. From determining the zip code, background, racial profiles, clearly are biased. That's the problem with the data. So bias, if you want to, whatever, we refer to this bias, but bias is very much is a missing data problem. So I'm training a model, I'm trying to make a prediction, and I don't observe everybody with equal probability to actually train that model. And so there are ways actually to fix this. And again, I'm not going to go all nerdy on everybody. I know that probably everybody is also tired of this. But the real question there is the counterfactual. So if machine learning doesn't make the decision, who makes the decision? So in a previous life, I was doing a lot of kind of impact evaluation in crime and violence prevention and the justice system. And I'm going to give you three kind of results of three studies that assess this causally rigorously. So this is credible results. This is not like my opinion. So judges whose sports team loses on the weekend are more likely to deny bail. Judges that were days where there is high temperature, so it's very hot, they're more likely to actually deny bails. Whether you're somebody that kind of shows up, you're kind of, the time you're hearing is almost random, but if you show up before lunch or after lunch, before lunch, judges actually issue more severe sentence than after lunch. So I know that there is arbitrariness and I'm not kind of disagreeing with anything that Jordana and Tiffany has mentioned. But the point is like the counterfactual of removing biases or trying to fix biases in current machine learning, maybe we are living with biases. And then there is a much more philosophical question. What is easier to fix? Implicit biases or this kind of random, I'm hungry, my team has lost. Again, I don't know who is a Philly or Astro fans in the audience. But the point is like, I don't want somebody's life consequential decision, whether it's a sentencing or a bail decision, to depend whether a sports team lost last year or last weekend, sorry. And so I think that's also, it's very important for me, rather than banning or not, whether it's appropriate or not, it's where do we find that missing data? How do we detect potential biases in current machine learning? And again, Sarah, I'm probably less kind of capable of Sarah, but the point is like, there are kind of statistical and methodological ways where we are looking for those biases. If we are conscious of potential biases in the type of data that we are collected and the missing data problem, then you are better positioned to improve the machine learning solution. And then the point is like, what is the counterfactual? Who is making the decision if some of the small are not making the decision? And I know it's thought-provoking, but I want to put this on the table.
In other words, don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah.
We certainly, we don't want to use it while it's not ready. You want to be able to do all those, take all those measures that Laura is talking about.
Absolutely. So we have about 3 minutes left. I kind of want to finish and wrap it up with, a hopeful question for the future. We talked about a lot of problems and things that need to be, straightened out. But what is your hope for the future of digital inclusion? And if you could have your way, what would a manifestation of that vision look like? Quickly, we're going to start with Sarah.
I would love to see everyone who is interested in using programming for good being able to do that. I think there are already a lot of high resource teams who have access to programmers because they can just spend money to throw it at hiring programmers. But there are all these low resource teams that I'm really excited about collaborating with who are doing things like helping defense attorneys sift through police misconduct data in order to say, hey, this person has previously lied on the stand, they should not be testifying against my client, that kind of thing. And this work that they're trying to do is so important, but they have so little resources to actually do it. And trying to get the power of automation into their hands, I think, is really promising. And so I'm really excited about giving tools to the people who are already working on supporting vulnerable communities.
Tiffany?
One of the things I'm really excited about yesterday, Google announced this unified speech model and that we would be, building out 1,000+ languages to support all of our products. And so when we talk about equity and access, of course, we have to think about, broadband and connectivity and the devices people use and all those types of issues. But to think, my husband's from South Sudan, he was a refugee, just the opportunity for people in all corners of the world to harness the power of the knowledge that the internet holds in the palm of their hand gives me so much hope. And I'm super excited about that effort and many others that are cropping up around the industry, again, to inform a lot of the equity questions that we talked about today.
Laura?
It's a combination of are we open and are we close these? It's very much kind of, I think traditionally AI and ML and whatever we are more used to interact with, our commercial kind of application of AI and ML is very much the movement into this, how can we use essentially these tools and the digital trace data and kind of computing ability to very much solving very real issue for underprivileged, under-resourced that clearly are able to then change things for the good.
And last but not least, I'm so sorry, Jordana.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think in the world that I see us creating right now, we have ubiquitous fiber-based networks for all communities, and that communities have brought solutions to the table, and they own and operate networks if that works, or they partner with locally owned internet service providers, and you're building the local economy so that kind of the big companies right now that are so huge, right? They're almost nation states. How can we kind of create more equity in who can build companies and really the promise of the democratizing impact of the internet? How can we fulfill that by investing in all communities? And let's see, as we approach this fiber-based networks everywhere, not letting some corporation say, oh, you can't understand this. You can own these networks, and you can be entrepreneurs in the internet economy and bring it from all sectors, and no more persistent poverty counties, or areas in our country where everyone has a chance to participate in our economy. We create a much stronger economy that way and address these extremes in income and wealth inequality. That's the world I want to work on with all of you.
Thank you so much. And, we are at time, a little over time. So I just want to thank the Marconi Society. I want to thank Paula and Chantel for all of their work. And of course, our panelists, Tiffany, Jordana, Laura, and Sarah. Thank you so much for having a discussion with me. And everyone, take care.
Huge
Bye.
thank you to Danielle.
Thank you.